Secretary of State being able to implement to get people to polls. Every year's not a presidential election.
Yeah.
You know, and you know that you're going to have those downtimes. How are we going to get people there?
No, thank you for that question. I think we should use the power of social media. I've been saying on the trail, bring sexy back to voting. You know, we got to make voting exciting. And, you know, to your point that every year is not an election year, we got to remind people that every single year there's a person or an issue on the ballot that's going to have an impact on your life. So whether it's a Health and Human Services levy, whether there's a safety levy, you can't only exercise that right and that responsibility every 4 years if you want the vision that you have for your community to flourish. And so we are programmed in this society at the hands of both political parties that only the presidential election year matters. And even when you hear the national dialogue, it's only about the presidential election. Well, it's the job of those of us who are elected, but primarily the Secretary of State, to remind people that they must vote. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people across the state. Some people don't even know the difference between a primary and a general, and how when you vote in the primary, you choose a side or not. That makes you independent, but if you choose a side, that's the ballot that you're going to get, and that's how you're counted, Democrat, Republican, or independent. To have a civics lesson, if you will, as Secretary of State, to continue to push, to partner with media outlets, be they print, be they TV, with organizations like the League of Women Voters or the NAACP or other organizations. They don't have to be kind of left-leaning, but just people who are pro-voter, to really excite people about the exercise of voting, and that there is no such thing as an off-year election, and that really the elected officials that really mean the most to your everyday life, so whether you care about education, you care about women's issues, workers' rights, having your potholes filled, all of that starts on the local level of government, which is technically not in a presidential year. And if those issues matter to you, then you got to vote, and you got to vote every single year.
Your response and reaction to the Supreme Court ruling?
It will come to no surprise in this room that I was thoroughly disappointed. Very, very disappointed, because, you know, the evidence was there, and Judge Economist, he wrote a 70-page brief that really laid out that the plaintiffs proved that the taking away of Golden Week and not having requisite evening and more weekend hours has a disproportionately negative impact on African Americans, on low-income voters, and homeless voters. And all of us should be concerned about that, whether or not we are in any of those groups, because it goes back to my base premise that the democracy is stronger the more people who vote. And as Secretary of State, you got to take that seriously, that if a judge says that the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act has been violated and the 14th Amendment to the Constitution has been violated, whether you agree with that or not, you got to take it seriously. But I want to take that a point further. Even though Secretary Husted disagrees with that, what he could have done, because we are so close to the election, is to say to the court, you know what, I disagree, but I'm going to live to fight that another day. I'm going to do what's in the best interest of the voters, not to cause confusion for the voters. We're going to go forward with this, and I'll fight that another day. But he did not do that. He could have taken the high ground, and to ask the United States Supreme Court in the 11th hour to stay that decision, even when the panel of judges on the Sixth Circuit agreed with Judge Economist, does a disservice to the voters. And not just the voters who were named in that ruling, but to all voters it does a disservice to, and it creates an environment of confusion, which I argue is 21st century voter suppression. If you think about it, every single year the rules have been changed without regard to the impact that it has on voters, and they haven't been changed in a pro-voter way. They have been changed in a way that takes away voting opportunities, and that is not good. It's not right. I have said it's un-American. I have said that it is immoral. And especially in light of Citizens United and the McClellan case, where everyday citizens like us in this room are finding it harder and harder to have impact. The greatest impact that we have, if we are not ultra wealthy, is through the power of the vote. And why would we go backwards? Why would we deny Ohioans opportunities that were gained because of the debacle of 2004? And my colleagues on the other side have not given a legitimate justification for taking away opportunities for voters in the great state of Ohio. Not one.
So had you been Secretary of State, you would not feel you were in a hot place?
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. And if I had disagreed, if I thought it was unconstitutional or it put a barrier up for voters, I would have continued to argue that point. But I would have taken the high ground this close to the election. And we were supposed to start. The Supreme Court gave that 16 hours before people were supposed to start early voting. That is not right. And also, as Secretary of State, I would have found a way to argue that. Say I'm being sued. Let me try to settle this with the plaintiffs. How can we come to an agreement to save taxpayers' dollars, but also to continue to push a pro-voter environment and not to cause confusion? My opponent has already spent, since he has been in office, over $400,000 on outside legal fees. That does not do a service. And again, every single one of those primarily has been not to give voters more access, but to give voters less access. So we got to find ways to kind of clamp that down and to come to a happy medium, as long as it's pro-voter. But yes, I would have taken the high road, even if I disagreed with the decision, and found a way to fight that another day, this close to the election.
If you were trying to negotiate, come to a happy medium.
Yeah.
What part of it do you think would be more willing to give up in this negotiation? The golden week or the weekend, instead of weekend voting?
Now you hit me hard with that question. I would say if this case were the same, I wouldn't be in court. I wouldn't be in court right now. So it's kind of hard for me. I firmly believe that what the legislature did in a bipartisan way post 2004 was the right thing to do for the voters of Ohio, and save for evidence that there's some rampant fraud or something. I don't even know why we're in this place. I don't know why my colleagues on the Republican side thought it okay to take away Golden Week, knowing that in 2012 about 14,000 people registered and voted at that same time. About 90,000 people voted during the Golden Week. Why would we do that? It doesn't make sense to me to take that back. So I can't say what necessarily I would have given up. I will say to you that if the case was exactly the same, I would be on the side of the plaintiffs in that regard.
Your